Welcome back to Stars and Myths. In this episode, we summarize and complete our observation on how stories propagate, transform, and sometimes even converge. The analysis of stories in terms of motifs has had a profound impact on perception of imagination. While our imagination seems unlimited, the observation is that most stories can be divided into a relatively small numbers of motifs. Tell us that much of our creative strength lies in how we combine motifs in millions of different ways. From literature to movies, one knows that stories often give us the impression that they repeat. There is seldom a completely new story. We have introduced the concept of a bag of motifs to understand it. The different traditions may create new motifs, but essentially they use the motifs already known to them in new combination. In this series, we've seen that a simple model explains many properties of motif distribution, with motifs appearing in one place and propagating randomly. We found out that motifs shared with the neighbors increase their lifetime, and that independent emergence play a significant role only in motifs with a long lifetime. Let's review a few motifs we discussed in previous episode. By analyzing the motif of the plied as a hen with its chicks, we found out that stories in the different regions share little in common, except just for this association between plied equal hen with chicks. In other words, the motif propagated with the domesticated chicken from Southeast Asia, but without any further details. This example shows that sometimes a simple association diffuses to its neighbors, with little else. Just as the hen and chicks motif spread in a minimal form, we suggest that similar mechanisms are at work with the motif of the animal on the moon that we discussed in the two previous episodes. We observe the similarities between a Buddhist story in which a hare is willing to sacrifice himself and as a reward stay on the moon, and a tale in Mesoamerica in which the moon god hesitates to jump into a fire and is punished by being slapped by the body of a hare, mark that's still visible today. An association between the moon and hair of frog may naturally arise as an optical illusion. I personally doubt that explanation. Both stories are very old. What surprised me is that without an apparent historical connection, the story in India and Mesoamerica combine several similar elements. Considering the regular appearance and disappearance of the sun and moon, it's quite plausible that the moon is associated with life, death, and even immortality. Also, the connection between frogs and water is almost universal. The frog and rabbit are often associated with fertility, as we see on the slide. They are all very fertile animals. The rabbit has a gestation period of roughly 30 days, which is close to the period of the moon and a woman's monthly cycle. Using this relationship, one can relate the moon to the frog and the rabbit through the association between life and fertility. Propagation of stories sometimes result from the propagation of simple associative motifs, and we believe that's the case here. In that model, it's not the motif of the rabbit on the moon that propagate, but rather the two associative motifs, moon and life, death, immortality, and rabbit and fertility. The motif of the rabbit on the moon therefore results from the convergence created by the limited set of associated motifs that restrict the number of possible combinations. Simple model effectively explains the similarities between Indian and Mesoamerican depiction of the rabbit on the moon. The associative motifs may have propagated very early and been recombined independently later in India and Mesoamerica. There's one more thing. The association of the moon with water may result from an inversion. Inversion, like a fire motif replacing a water motif, have been known at least since Levi-Strauss' work as an important mechanism to create new stories. Let's provide other examples to illustrate our thoughts. Let's look here at the left map. In North America, the rabbit brings fire, there's a blue dot. Whereas in South America, the toad brings fire, there are the red dots. If we move to the right image, in Africa, both the hare and the toad are associated with death. Both motifs exhibit a complementary distribution. In those examples, the rabbit and the toad function as a symbolic equivalence in connection to fire and death. So after identifying the symbolic equivalence of the hare and the toad in connection to fire and death, let's analyze the fire-water inversion. Connection between the moon and rain is prevalent in Africa, China, and the Americas. They are also the region where the rabbit on the moon stories are related to fire. From this discussion, it becomes clear that as one moves around the globe, the rabbit on the moon may transform into a frog on the moon, with both possibilities existing at the geographic interface. The frog in the moon may also transform into a water carrier in the moon. In summary, we propose that convergence does not rely on a single motif, but rather on new combination of a limited set of widespread associative motifs which act as powerful attractors and lead to seemingly similar stories. By associating these widely recognized associative motifs locally, similar yet distant stories can develop independently. Different motifs, like the connection between the hare and the moon in India and Mesoamerica, evolved independently, producing very similar stories due to the common presence of this simple association. The previous map, showed us a clear continental pattern. Now let's zoom in on a specific piece of cultural evidence for Mesoamerica to see association in details. This Maya pod is fascinating as it shows how local transformation in Mesoamerica completely transforms the rabbit on the moon by adding a new aspect associated with the rabbit. Recent analysis of the Maya pottery that you find in the reference, complemented by the decipherment of the Maya hieroglyphs on the pot, reveal a story that highlights the rabbit's famous role as a trickster. On this vase, a wealthy god of commerce, but also a god of the underworld, kneels naked and defeated on the left of the big rabbit. The rabbit, held by the moon goddess on the right, not only carries the god's head as a trophy, but as the hieroglyph suggests, the rabbit even insults him. The story is a perfect illustration of our main thesis. It shows how a local tradition took two powerful and widespread motifs, the simple rabbit-moon association and the global trickster rabbit, and fused them in a single, uniquely powerful narrative. Now, let's zoom out. The rabbit is a trickster, an association found in Africa, Eurasia, and the Americas. Considering the broad associative motifs of the trickster rabbit, it's not surprising that this association is found in several traditions. Among the Mi'kmaq in Canada, one finds a similar structure to Mesoamerican stories with a rabbit as a trickster. Here's a story. Rabbit is getting robbed, so he set snares and catch the robber, who turns out to be the Moon Man. Rabbit smears clay on his face so everyone will know him and makes him promise to stop. The clay marks become the spot on the moon, and the rabbit keeps his food and his pride. Here again, we have a combination of the rabbit as a trickster and the moon. This episode completes our series on the moon. Besides telling nice stories, we've shown how an incredible similarity between stories can be explained by a small number of almost universal associative motifs. The motifs are locally recombined, giving the impression that odds of the two stories having developed independently are near zero. In reality, the probability of stories with similar motifs is quite large. The next episode will be about the eagle in the sky, starting from one of the oldest written stories in the world, the myth of Etana, the Mesopotamian king who was transported by an eagle. Here's the main reference. If you want to dig into that topic, there are good stories. So see you next time. Bye bye.